Welcome to HFY Chronicles. At the sum of 1,000 subscribers, I'll post a special series just for you. Subscribe now. Blood dripped from the knife in his remaining fingers as prisoner 1138 stood before the warehouse, his cold blue eyes fixed on the entrance where children's muffled cries echoed from within. The butcher of Haven Hive had work to do, and this time it wasn't for money or power. It was for redemption. But to understand how one of the galaxy's most feared killers ended up here, we must return to where it all began, 48 hours earlier, in the fluorescent-lit confines of Detention Center Alpha. The recycled air hung heavy with anticipation as 200 of the sector's most dangerous criminals shifted restlessly in their seats. These weren't ordinary prisoners. They were Prisoner Battalion 2, a specialized unit of convicts who traded their lethal skills for the promise of reduced sentences. Among them sat Prisoner 1138, known to few by his real name, William "Billy" Free. His presence was like a black hole, drawing nervous glances from even the hardest criminals, who instinctively recognized a predator among predators. Lieutenant Marcus Roke's footsteps echoed through the briefing hall as he approached the podium, his four eyes blinking rapidly, a telltale sign of nervousness that didn't go unnoticed by the seasoned convicts. Prisoner Sergeant 113, a towering centurion with scarred carapace, bellowed for silence. The respect he commanded was immediate, conversations dying mid-sentence as all eyes turned forward. "All right, roll call," Roke announced, his command box blinking green. The lieutenant shuffled his papers, avoiding direct eye contact with the assembled killers, thieves, and mercenaries before him. "We have an update on the search and rescue we're tasked to." "We're called off." A voice cut through the silence from the back. "They found her. She okay?" The question carried genuine concern, surprising from a group society had written off as irredeemable. Roke's hesitation lasted a fraction too long. "The cult of Skelos has her." The reaction was explosive. Chairs scraped against metal flooring as prisoners leaped to their feet, their voices rising in a cacophony of rage and bloodlust. The cult of Skelos was infamous across 3 systems for their ritualistic sacrifices, particularly of children. Even among the hardened criminals of Battalion 2, there were lines that shouldn't be crossed. In the chaos, only a few noticed the subtle shift in prisoner 1138's posture. The temperature around him seemed to drop several degrees as he slowly rose from his seat, his movements deliberate and precise, like a predator preparing to strike. The chair he hurled against the wall silenced the room instantly. The Iceman, as they called him, never lost control, until now. As he stormed out of the briefing hall, the other prisoners exchanged worried glances. They had seen 1138 kill before during sanctioned missions. He approached murder like an artist approaching a canvas, with cold precision and terrible creativity. But this was different. This was personal. What none of them knew, not even Lieutenant Roke, was that Billy Free had made a promise long ago, written in blood and sealed with death. No one hurts kids. And now, as he made his way to the armory with deadly purpose, that promise was about to paint Haven Hive red once again. The silence that followed Billy's exit was shattered by the wailing of emergency sirens. Red lights strobed through the corridors as Captain Kern burst through the doors, his scaled face flushed with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Lieutenant, your prisoner just took down 3 guards with his bare hands and raided the weapons locker. He's gone." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Among the assembled prisoners, whispers began to circulate. They knew what the Iceman was capable of, had seen glimpses of his lethal efficiency during sanctioned missions, but this was different. This was the Butcher of Haven Hive unchained. 20 years earlier, in the twisted metal canyons of Haven Hive, the neon lights of the orbital city painted harsh shadows across young Billy's face as he ran messages for Uncle Esso. The sprawling space station was a labyrinth of welded-together ships and stations where the line between legitimate business and criminal enterprise blurred like stars seen through polluted atmosphere. Uncle Esau's office occupied what had once been the captain's quarters of an ancient luxury liner, now permanently docked and integrated into the Hive's upper levels. The crime boss sat behind his antique wooden desk, smoke from his ever-present cigar creating a hazy aureole around his balding head. "Billy, my boy," he said, warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sit down. We need to talk about your future." Billy was 22 then, lean and dangerous as a stiletto, He had already earned a reputation among the hive's criminal element. Where others relied on brute force, Billy approached violence like a mathematician solving an equation, with cold, precise logic that left witnesses shaking. "You've got a gift," Essel continued, sliding a glass of amber liquid across the desk. "I'm making you my enforcer, but first I need your word on something." He leaned forward, suddenly serious. "No matter what else we do in this business, no one hurts kids. That's the line we don't cross, understand?" Billy nodded, not knowing that this promise would one day tear his world apart. Back in the present, Lieutenant Roque stared at the prisoner file he should have read months ago. The images made his stomach churn. Crime scenes that looked like abattoirs, bodies dismembered with surgical precision, messages written in blood. The butcher of Haven Hive hadn't earned his name through idle threats. "Sir," a young guard interrupted, "we've got a location on the stolen transport. He's headed for the Industrial District, Warehouse Sector 7. Captain Kieran's face darkened. "That's cult territory. Alert local authorities and tell them to stay clear. When the butcher's hunting, you either help him or stay out of his way." In the Warehouse District, Billy Free checked his weapons one final time. The stolen rifle felt familiar in his hands, its weight a comfort as he approached the decrepit building. Intelligence suggested the cult had taken up residence in an abandoned manufacturing facility, its vast spaces perfect for their dark rituals. The setting sun cast long shadows through broken windows, and somewhere inside, a child whimpered. Billy's grip tightened on his weapon as memories flooded back of another child, another time, and a betrayal that had turned his cold precision into apocalyptic fury. The warehouse loomed before him, a rusted monument to industrial decay. Billy moved like a shadow through the gathering dusk, decades of experience guiding each silent step. The acrid smell of incense mixed with something metallic. Blood. Through a shattered window, he caught glimpses of robed figures moving in candlelight, their shadows dancing grotesquely on grimy walls. Their chanting carried on the evening air, words in an ancient tongue that made his skin crawl. But it was the sound underneath, the muffled sobs of children, that made his trigger finger itch. As he planned his approach, his mind drifted back to that fateful day in Haven Hive when everything changed. He had been sorting through intelligence reports in his office when the holodisc appeared on his desk. No sender, no message, just a name and a number. Susie, 8. That childish heart dotting the I had stopped his own heart cold. The investigation took 3 weeks. Each lead, each piece of evidence, drove the knife deeper into his soul. Uncle Esau, the man who had saved him, who had given him a home and purpose, had been running a side operation. Children disappeared from the lower levels of Haven Hive, shipped off-world to the highest bidders. The same fate that might have awaited him, had he not put 3 bullets into Vito all those years ago. A sound from the warehouse snapped Billy back to the present. A door creaked open, spilling yellow light onto the loading dock. 2 robed figures emerged, dragging something between them. In the dim light, he caught a glimpse of small feet trailing on concrete. The butcher of Haven Hive moved. The first cultist never saw him coming. Billy's knife found the gap between vertebrae with practiced ease, severing the spine before the man could cry out. The second reached for a weapon, but Billy's remaining hand closed around his throat, crushing the larynx with mechanical precision. As the body slumped to the ground, Billy caught the child, a young Otar girl, her scales dulled by fear and dehydration. Her eyes were wide, but she didn't scream. She recognized salvation when she saw it, even wrapped in violence. "More inside," she whispered, voice raw. "In the basement." Billy nodded, settling her behind a stack of crates. "Stay here, don't make a sound." He pressed a small transmitter into her hand. "When it beeps green, run east. There will be help waiting." Inside, the warehouse was a maze of abandoned machinery and makeshift altars. The air grew thicker with incense as he descended, following the sound of chanting. The basement opened into a vast chamber, once used for storage, now converted into a temple to their dark god. Dozens of cultists surrounded a central altar, their voices rising in crescendo. Children huddled in cages along the walls, their fear a palpable thing in the hot, close air. On the altar lay another child, bound and struggling weakly against her restraints. The high priest raised a ceremonial blade, its edge catching the candlelight. Billy thought of Susie, of all the children he had failed to save. His hand tightened on his rifle. The butcher of Haven Hive went to work. What followed would give the local authorities nightmares for years to come. Billy moved through the chamber like death incarnate, each shot and slice precisely calculated for maximum effect. Cultists fell like wheat before a scythe, their screams of terror drowning out their prayers. But they weren't defenseless. A massive figure emerged from the shadows, some horrific hybrid of machine and flesh, its augmented jaws snapping at Billy's left hand. Pain exploded as fingers disappeared into that mechanical maw. A ritual blade caught him across the face, splitting skin and scraping bone. Still, he didn't stop, couldn't stop, not while children watched, not while they needed him. The fight became a dance of blood and shadows. Billy's remaining fingers found vital points with lethal accuracy, his knife opening throats and severing arteries with surgical precision. The hybrid creature pursued him relentlessly, servos whirring as it moved with unnatural speed. Pain was a distant concern now. Even as his own blood mixed with that of his victims on the concrete floor, Billy's movements never faltered. Each strike, each shot was measured, deliberate, the work of a man who had turned killing into an art form. The children's cages became a maze of obstacles, forcing him to draw the fighting away from them. The hybrid's claws raked across his back, tearing through flesh and muscle, but Billy barely registered the wound. He had one goal now: ensure no child would leave this place in a body bag. "Your god demands sacrifice," the high priest screamed, backing away as his followers fell. "The blood must flow." Billy's response was cold as space itself. "Then let it be yours." The final confrontation was swift and brutal. The hybrid lunged, its mechanical jaws spreading impossibly wide. Billy dropped and rolled, coming up beneath the creature. His knife found the seam between flesh and machine, piercing upward into whatever passed for its brain. The monster crashed to the ground, twitching and sparking. The high priest tried to run. They always did. Billy's last bullet caught him in the spine, dropping him mere feet from the stairs. As the man crawled, babbling prayers and pleas, Billy approached with the same methodical calm that had made him legendary in Haven Hive. "Please," the priest begged, "our work is sacred." Billy knelt beside him, knife gleaming in the candlelight. No one hurts kids. What happened next would never make it into official reports. The rescue teams found him an hour later, methodically picking locks on the children's cages with his mangled hand. His right eye was a ruined mess, blood painting half his face crimson, yet he continued working, refusing help until every cage was opened, every child accounted for. The young Otar girl from outside had led authorities to the warehouse, just as he'd planned. She watched from behind a medical technician as Billy finally allowed himself to collapse, his mission complete. In the hospital, the steady beep of monitors marked time as Billy drifted in and out of consciousness. The handcuff on his right wrist seemed almost absurd given his condition, but protocol was protocol. Captain Kiern's voice droned on about regulations and consequences, but Billy wasn't listening. His attention was fixed on the door, waiting. When it finally opened and the little Otar girl rushed in, something broke inside him, something that had been frozen since that day he found Susie's hollow disc. She hugged him with the pure, unconditional gratitude only a child could offer, and for the first time in decades, Billy Free felt warm tears on his face. The butcher of Haven Hive, the Iceman, the killer who had painted the stars red, all those personas melted away, leaving just a man who had finally kept his promise. "Thank you," the girl's parents whispered, but Billy barely heard them. In that moment, holding this child he had saved, he saw all the others, the ones he couldn't save, the ones whose ghosts had driven him for so long, and for the first time, they seemed to be at peace. The doctors would later say he was lucky to survive. The prisoners of Battalion 2 would whisper that he was too tough to die, but Billy knew the truth. He had lived because those children needed him to. In the end, that was enough. They never did send him back to the gallows. Some said it was because of public pressure. Others claimed the governor had a soft spot for child saviors. Billy didn't care either way. He had found something worth more than freedom or redemption. He had found purpose. And in the years that followed, whenever children went missing, whenever monsters thought themselves above justice, a whisper would spread through the criminal underworld: the butcher is coming. For some men, retirement isn't an option. Some promises last forever. If this story of redemption and justice moved you, Don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button and share it with someone who appreciates a powerful narrative. Want more gripping tales like The Butcher of Haven Hive? Subscribe to our channel and turn on that notification bell to never miss our daily uploads of thrilling space opera stories. What would you have done in Billy Free's position? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives.